Hey everybody, the March 2021 Roundup is brought to you by Fun Again Games. And happy April Fool's Day, everybody, if in fact you celebrate such things, if in fact it is April 1st when you are watching this at some point. Don't worry, there will be no japes or tomfoolery or trickery. This is going to be 100% all the truth, all the time, talking about the games my wife and I have played over the last 4 weeks. And speaking of telling the truth, here's a big surprise. It really kind of snuck up on me. As of tomorrow, I will be beginning my 10th year of filming this show. I will not be at 10 years yet. I'm at 9 years starting tomorrow, but I'm working on my 10th year, which is kind of an arbitrary milestone. I mean, I know. Come back, tell you about it next year. But still, it's a pretty big deal for me. I would never have imagined I would have been going this long, and things have certainly changed quite a bit over the last almost decade of me filming this show. I've changed a lot. The way I film has changed a lot. My situation in the world has changed a lot. And my attitude about a lot of stuff has changed a lot too, which is as good a segue as any into announcing I am today also putting up a code of conduct for my channel, which has been a long time coming. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. You can hit that eye in the top right corner screen or follow the links down in the show notes. Links for the code of conduct will be going forward in every video on my channel, including all 5,000 that I have filmed over the last 9 years. I'm going to find a way to retroactively put the links there so everybody understands that if you want to come and comment on my videos, there are certain expectations, and you can hit the code of conduct. It's actually what I'm going to be filming right after this, right after I talk about the games. Oh, also, one other thing you may notice, depending on the platform you're on, something I've started this month, actually, is fundraising, basically. I mean, for almost a year now, I have been wearing shirts of various and sundry causes I care about. Somebody recently pointed out that, hey, do you actually donate to these causes? And I said, yes. And they said, what are they? And I said, here they are. And I went one step further and started putting donate buttons on my video. So whenever you see me full screen wearing a shirt somewhere, to the side or down below, there will be a donate button if you would like to help make a difference in that particular issue. And I mean, I just don't see any reason not to do it. The one I've got for this video is for it's Asian American Justice. The AAJC, which is a great organization trying to fight back against cultural stereotypes, trying to raise voter rolls, and obviously, with what's going on in the world right now, the work they're doing is incredibly important. And if you think so, find the donate button and just go on ahead and tap it and throw a few bucks in. It's just going to ask you for your credit card. 100% of the proceeds go to the organization in question. They don't go to me. They don't go to YouTube. And it's just something I'm going to be doing going forward because I want my channel to be better. I want my channel to be a force for good going into my 9th year of filming. But okay, you have been very patient. You have waited long enough. You're here for the games. Then let me give you the games. Obviously, first of all, I'll talk about the games that contributors to the channel covered. Then I will go over the expansions Jen and I played. And then finally, the countdown of my actual games. As always, they will be countdown from least favorite to most favorite. And I've got another special treat in store for you today if I have set this up correctly. Let's see if I can, let's see, where is that link? Yep, I am not alone in today's roundup. I am now going to throw to one of my contributors, Shea, where he will do his own countdown. So, Shea, take it away.
Thanks, Rahdo. This month I covered 3 games, 2 of which were Kickstarter previews, and I liked all of them. But because this is the internet and we need to rank things, let's start things off with Rise of Gnomes. And this is a worker placement area control game about brewing beer in the land of Brewmancia, I believe. It's got a very quirky theme. Everyone is playing as a different fantasy race that has their own specialties as far as their own brewing goes. But there is also an AI opponent. And you can play this game in a solo mode, in a co-op mode, in a competitive mode, or in a cutthroat competitive mode. But no matter what, there's always going to be the gnomes, and they are rising up. And they are going to be a constant opponent no matter which way you play. Now, there's a lot of pretty classic Euro game area control, like worker placement stuff in this, but the worker placement, I think, is especially interesting and something I liked the most about this game, which is that there are two ways that you can put down workers. During the worker placement phase, you can put down workers onto the main worker placement board, and that has spaces that are going to be the same every round. They're a little bit expensive, and there's limited placement, so you're not sure if you're going to be able to place there, but you usually will be able to. And those actions will happen right away. But next to those are a bunch of action cards that you place out. There's 10 total action cards with 2 copies of 5 actions, and you're going to put them out in a random order at the beginning of every round, which means that the order in which those actions are taken is going to be different from round to round. And also, some of them will be less, there will be less opportunities to do it, or some of them might not show up at all if you're a little unlucky. And but the big thing is that those happen at the end of the worker placement round. So you can place a worker on an expensive space that'll happen right away, or you can place it into the queue. And I wouldn't call it a programming kind of game, but you are planning ahead. So everyone is putting their workers down, and it's not until everyone has placed down all of the workers that you start doing those action card actions. And that I thought was a really interesting way to do the worker placement mechanics in this game. On top of that, like I said, it's got a very quirky theme, and it's very, very colorful, very fun. There's a lot of different factions that you can play as, and I know that there's a Kickstarter expansion that's going to add even more factions. So check that out. Rise of the Gnomes. Now, my number 2, and I can already hear people hear the comment section on this. My number 2 is going to be Scythe. There's a reason it's not number 1. I'll get to it in a minute. Suffice to say, though, Scythe is an amazing game. I should say Rise of the Gnomes was a paid Kickstarter preview. Scythe was not. We covered this for just because it's been something that hasn't been covered on the Rahdo channel for a long time. But I wanted to play it because I like the kind of competitive aspect of these games. It does have a little bit of a cutthroat nature. I am slightly a little bit less of a Care Bear than Rahdo is, so I was excited to try this out. And even though I've played it before, I really wanted to show it off on the channel because it is fantastic. This is an excellent game. For those who aren't aware of what Scythe is, it's got a lot of different genres in it. It's got action selection, it's got an area control mechanic to it, but basically you are playing as a faction of people in a post-apocalyptic or dystopian future Eastern Europe, and you're really just trying to get by. There's a lot of resource management. You're moving your workers around and getting resources from the board. You're putting out these mechs that do a little bit of combat, but also unlock powerful character abilities. You have a leader that's moving around the board and might go on, might have encounters. You might go to the center of the board, which will activate a completely new action card space for you. There's a lot going on in this game, and it all works together really well. A lot of games you have this many mechanics, and some of them just aren't going to work together, but these all mesh pretty fantastically. There's nothing in this game that I would consider clunky or hard to manage or anything like that. Now, I clearly like this game a lot. Why isn't it number 1? Well, there is one aspect of it that, for me, kind of pushes it down a little bit, and that is that I don't think it works amazingly at 2-player. I think this game shines at 4 players, but I play most of the games that I play 2-player, and so that I have to take into consideration. I will also say that, while I didn't mind the competitiveness, the really cutthroat nature, because you can be cutthroat in this game. A big thing about this game is that when you collect resources, they don't go to your player mat or anything. They stay on the board, which means it's really, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's definitely possible for other players to swoop in and take all the stuff that you've been working towards and just pull the rug out from underneath you. And that, for some people, is going to be a big deal breaker. I don't mind it, though it is devastating when that happens to you, and I don't love that. But I think that some competition in these games are a-okay. But again, it's not going to be for everybody, and occasionally it can be a little too harsh even for me. But the main thing is that this game is not. It's not amazing at 2-player. Now, I played this with the modular board, which definitely improves it at 2-player because you have a much smaller board and it doesn't feel a little overwhelming, the amount of space that there is in front of you. But even so, I think this game at 4-player absolutely is an excellent game that you should consider. It might not necessarily be right for you, but I think it's definitely one of those games that people, I think, should try. I should also mention that I made a strategy video for that on my channel, RTFM, and it sort of coincided with the Scythe run-through and final thoughts on Rahdo's channel, and that covers basic beginner strategies for, if you're just starting out, it can be a hard game to get into, but there are a few pitfalls that if you avoid, you can probably do pretty well. Now, that was my number 2. So what is my number 1? It is Mage Noir. This is another Kickstarter preview, and this tickled so many things that I didn't realize I had been missing. It ticked a lot of boxes for me. I like Magic the Gathering a lot. I don't play Magic the Gathering these days. I played it a lot when I was a kid. I kind of got out of it. I'm not into collectible card games anymore, but I do still have this fondness for Magic. And while Mage Noir and Magic are not the same game by any stretch, they do have a similar feel. They elicit a similar like emotional response, and so this had this great nostalgic connection for me. But on top of that, it does a lot of things differently, and it improves on a lot of the mechanics that I think Magic, never was able to get out of. But of course, it's working on the mechanics that are in Magic that aren't necessarily things that you would include in a modern game. You don't have to worry about loading mana into your deck. Instead, there's mana in the center of the board, and the mana that you get and that you're using to cast your spells, that is a completely new mechanic that is added onto the gameplay and adds onto the strategic layer, because there's 6 types of mana, and I'm going to say mana and mana interchangeably, by the way. I hope that doesn't bother anybody. I never figured out what the right way was. So every turn, you're going to grab 3 mana cards, but you're not just going to grab them directly into your hand. You're going to put them into 2 different mana piles. And then you're going to pick one of them, which means that the other player might be able to get something out of the mana that you are putting out into the available ether, as they call it in the game. And this is just one aspect of the game that really increases the strategic thinking that you have to put out. Now, unlike Magic, this is not a game with a lot of monsters that you're putting out and they're fighting each other. It's more about casting spells. Now, there are some monsters in the game, but mostly it's about casting spells and preparing your spells to be channeled as fuel for other spells, because mana isn't the only way that the only resource that you need to cast your spells. Every spell that you put on the board, or almost every spell that you put on the board, can be channeled. And what that means is, instead of casting it for its ability, you put it to the side of the board, and now that is a resource that will unlock other spells that you have, because some spells will have keywords that'll say like flame or drop or wind, depending on what element the card is coming from. And the cards themselves, the spells, will have things like draconic flame. So it has the word flame on it, which means it can be used as a component for another spell. So I might play Draconic Flame. That could do a little bit of damage to the enemy, but if I channel it to the side, then I'll be able to play a much stronger card in my hand that requires me to have 1 flame. So there's a lot of, do I play this now or do I save it for something that's stronger later? There's a lot of that timing mechanic window that you really have to plan for. Now, this is also a game where you are constructing your deck ahead of time, and this has the most freedom I've ever seen in deck construction games, because you can put anything in your deck. It's not like you have influence. You have to balance whatever card you put in with the correct mana. No, you'll always have the mana you need, and you can put cards from every faction in it, every element. What is constraining you in that sense is what is going to be efficient and what is going to be what is going to combo well with each other, because there are some really great combos in this game if you could find them. So what you'll end up realizing is that, I could put water and fire and earth and wind all together in this, but really I want to focus something. I want to do a couple of things really well. And so I'm going to put, in the run through that I did, I made a deck that was fire and water, because fire does a lot of damage, but it hurts you a little bit sometimes. And water has some pretty good healing cards. So I was able to focus a lot of damage, hurt myself in the process, but have the blue cards that were healing me to mitigate that self damage affliction. But also I put 1 or 2 wind cards in there because it just happened to kind of coincide with what I was going for. And I didn't have to worry about, making sure I had all the right mana or making sure I didn't go over an influence limit. And I don't mind those restrictions in games, but I really appreciated that the only thing that was holding me back was my own hubris, essentially. I really like being given just enough rope to hang myself, because that, I think, forces you to really think strategically about this. And so I think Mage Noir did a very good job in that regard. But also, even if you just want to focus on your own, just one element, that ends up working too. The whatever you call it, the pre-made decks that the game came with were pretty solid. Some of them I liked a little bit better than others, but I think all of them were, at the very least, really good starting off points for personalizing the deck. So I'm really excited to see how this game progresses. I think it's already surpassed its Kickstarter goal, so congratulations on that. And I'm really excited to see how far it can go, because I think there's a lot of design space here. So those were the 3 games that I covered this month, and I will pass it back to you. Bye, folks.
Yeah, when he told me he was putting Mage Noir over Scythe, I figured, you got to get on the camera and explain yourself, pal. And yeah, let me know what you think, folks. Would you like to see Shea back? Definitely, the Rise of Gnomes, watching his video, makes me want to play that in its co-op mode, because it looks like it could be really cool. And he also, once again, convinced me Scythe is not for me and Jen, although maybe someday we'll try it co-op. And yeah, I would certainly play Mage Noir over Magic the Gathering any day of the week. But anyway, thank you, Shea. You are not, of course, the only contributor to the channel, so let's move on, and we next see what Ryan got up to. He actually put out 2 wonderful rules videos, one for Genotype, and I'm not going to spend much time talking about this right now, because I also did a run-through for Genotype, so this will appear in my countdown a little bit later. So let's talk about the other game Ryan hit, which was Longshot, the dice game, which honestly didn't really necessarily attract much interest for me. I was kind of like, maybe it's going to be interesting. I do like roll and writes, and my wife likes horses, but neither is particularly interested in a roll and write all about betting on racing horses. But if you folks are like me and thought, yeah, I just don't know if that's going to be for me, I strongly recommend you watch Ryan's video, because he 100% convinced me that this is a game Jen and I would really like, because of all the cool special powers that are tied to all the horses as you make investments in horses. So you can, and every time you the dice roll and move one horse up, they pull other horses with them. So even in a 2-player game, I suspect this game will work really fantastically. And this is one I am going to seek out now. And if you, again, want to know why, check out Ryan's excellent rules summary, which, by the way, was also hilarious. And it should give you a pretty good idea of what makes Longshot the dice game so special. And I should say, both Ryan's games were paid videos, so, and Longshot, I believe, is live on Kickstarter right now, as is Mage Noir. Rise of the Gnomes, has it gone live yet? If it hasn't gone live yet, it's going live very soon. But it might have actually gone live by now. But anyway, continuing on, we had one more contributor show up in addition to the normal Shea and Ryan, and that was Tim Chewin, who has a fantastic channel. And if you find Tim's run-through on my channel for Fort, you will also find links for his channel. He really specializes in wonderful, high-quality photography representation of the games, because he is actually a professional photographer, and he's got some of the best-looking videos. And so he decided to slum it with us and do a quick rundown on Fort, which is a card game I have wanted to play for quite a while, but I have not been able to get my hands on a copy. Tim had a copy, he loved it, and so he spent a few minutes appearing on the channel walking us through just how quirky and charming and smart the design is. And like I said, he has definitely convinced me. I was already convinced, but now I'm even more in a FOMO must play this game. And so I want to say thanks to Tim for hopping on and giving us a quick tour of it. And also, I had a great time. I did a top 10 with Tim last month as well, where we talked about gameplay combat mechanisms. So it was the month of Tim. We had a great time. And again, again, go check out the Fort video because you will find links to Tim's channel, and I highly recommend everybody subscribe. He is making some of the best looking content for board games out there. Right, okay, so that was it for contributors. The channel is still named after me for now, anyway, so maybe you want to hear about what Jen and I played. Let's start with the expansions, and again, doing a countdown from our least favorite to our most favorite. So, coming in, first off, we have number 5, Merlin Morgana. And Jen and I love Merlin. It's a great rondel. It's literally a roll and move game from designer Stefan Feld, who is Jen's and my favorite designer of all time. And so we love Merlin, and we thought, oh, well, we'll love more Merlin. More Merlin in the form of Morgana should be great. And to be fair, the modules that get added to the game are really good. There's a new market board that allows you to spend coins, which are a new thing, to get all kinds of extra bonuses as you need them. And there is the Morgana board, which is which gives everybody one more turn every round for the 6 rounds of the game, where they get to do a Morgana action in addition to the actions of their own knights. And so that adds a lot more variety and variability, and if you're looking for it, a little bit of take that, because some of Morgana's powers can be kind of directly negatively influential of other players. Although I wouldn't have said it was so much so that would be a problem for me and Jen. The reason it comes in at number 5 has to do more not with the content. I thought all the gameplay elements that were introduced were great. The issue was, it makes the game longer, significantly longer, because 6 rounds, each player is going to take 1 extra action every round to do a Morgana action. And then on top of that, if you also turn on the market action, you can get 2 or 3 extra turns per round, depending on how many coins you collect. And so the game got significantly longer. Now, I don't know that I would ever recommend putting both the market and the Morgana expansion in. One or the other might have been fine, but you know what? This is a problem we had with the last expansion, the Arthur expansion, which again gave you 1 extra action you can do every round. And I keep wondering, why is Stefan Feld and his co-designers, we had a new co-designer on this, it wasn't Renick like he had done for the base game, why they aren't, when they introduce, hey, you get to do extra actions through Morgana or Arthur or the market or whatever, why don't we remove some of our regular knight, just so the game length stays the same? Because that's my only problem. Merlin should not take over 3 hours for 2 players to play. And we didn't quite get that, but it was a long game. Like I said, I would not mix the two again. I thought both of them were great, and Merlin is still fantastic. I'm just hoping someday, Mr. Feld, Herr Feld, will say, yeah, you know what, if you want to remove one of your own personal knight die if you're playing with Morgana, or if you're playing with Arthur, just to keep the length a little bit more under control. Still, we had a good time playing. It was a fun time, just a little bit longer with all the extra stuff we can do, which is why Merlin Morgana came in at number 5. Then we move on to number 4, Valeria Card Kingdom's Darksworn. This was a paid Kickstarter preview, and I think the Kickstarter is still going right now. I think it's about to end, I'm not sure. But this is an expansion for Valeria Card Kingdoms, which is a wonderful dice action selection game. It's very much inspired by Machi Koro, where everybody's got a collection of cards that represent different powers they can call upon. And on a player's turn, they roll dice, and if you roll the numbers that match your cards, you get to activate them. And so it has kind of like a slot machine vibe, but everybody else gets to activate their stuff when you're rolling the dice. Valeria Card Kingdoms itself is fantastic. Jen, I've always dug it, and what Darksworn does is turns it into a cooperative game. And that's huge. Honestly, I don't know that I'd want to go back to play Card Kingdoms as a competitive game now that Darksworn lets us play cooperatively. It does a really great job of it. Really smart system to bring cooperative play, where we're working collaboratively to fight monsters. And we're also, interesting, I think the game comes with 6 chapters of a big story campaign you can play through, and then a 7th chapter, which is randomly generated, so you can just have infinite replayability. Everything about this has been done wonderfully. Of course, there's new cards that come into the game as well, but maybe it's not going to be for everybody. Not everybody likes cooperative play, but I love working with Jen instead of trying to beat her, and we already love Valeria Card Kingdoms, and I have seen games go bad trying to turn competitive into co-op, but this is not one of them. Darksworn does it right, and it came in at my number 4 expansion. Then we move on to the number 3 expansion, Marvel Champions. I got some new superheroes in the mail, and so we got to play them, and so my number 3 of the month is Quicksilver. who I like quite a bit. Really new, cool stuff. Very thematic the way Quicksilver works, because it just seems like his main thing is he can untap himself so that he can do multiple actions every round. And for a super speedster, that's just perfect. And everything about him is supplementing that. And I thought it was really nicely done. Jen and I, we lost, unfortunately, a game against Ultron. Me as Wanda, and Jen as Pietro, and it was a good time. The only reason Quicksilver comes in a little bit lower is it's continuing. I don't know, I just got to get over it. I just continue to be bummed that the developers are ignoring the personal lives of these heroes. They started out strong doing it, and then they got even with, She-Hulk and all that, and then Miss Marvel was amazing, but Quicksilver, Pietro, basically has no personal cards. He has one alter ego card, which... why isn't it his daughter? In the comic books, he's a divorced single father. Why is that not in here? Luna is a really cool character who would have really interesting special powers too, having to do with thwarting. But instead, they just got some throwaway reference to some company he works for in X Factor. I'm like, what? And it just continues to drive me nuts. The developers are continuing to make beautifully, wonderfully designed characters, the thematic way it all works, but they just seem to be getting further and further and further away from what truly makes Marvel Champions special, the focus on the personal lives of these heroes as well. And I don't think I've seen, previously I thought Hawkeye was the high watermark for it, but Quicksilver maybe even more so. How could you leave Luna out? Anyway though, still, had a good time. Great design character. And if you don't care about thematic or that kind of stuff, a great addition to Marvel Champions. Then we go on to my number 2, Auztralia, which is 2 expansions, Tazmania and Revenge of the Old Ones. I am just combining them into one entry because this is going on Kickstarter, I think in the first week of April, maybe the second. I don't quite remember. So you'll be seeing my run through for these soon. But the Kickstarter campaign, paid Kickstarter preview, by the way. The Kickstarter campaign lets you get both of these expansions. Tazmania is a new 2-sided board that is for 1 or 2 players, and 3 players if you combine it with Revenge of the Old Ones. So it is tight. Tazmania is it's a knife fight in a phone booth, I think is the term, and it's a blast. It addresses my biggest problem with the original Auztralia, that the board was too big. No more. And what's brilliant is, like I said, it's a 2-side map. You've got the standard map, which I'm showing on screen right now, but if you flip it over, you've got a customizable map that will make a unique layout every time, and the center of Tazmania, you don't know what's there until you go in and explore. So it gives much more of an exploration vibe. Really nicely done. The other expansion, Revenge of the Old Ones, was less interesting for me and Jen. It basically increases the overall player count of Auztralia because one player can come in and control the Elder Gods, can control the Old Ones. They have their own hand of cards that they are playing when it's their turn, when they get activated. They, instead of just having all the monsters on the table right from the get-go, they have spawn points where every round they are spawning more monsters and, controlling them using their cards. And so I think for some people, this is the secret sauce, because suddenly it becomes a very aggressive, in-your-face, one versus all, where one player is basically, Cthulhu's minions trying to destroy all the other players, and everybody else is trying to fight. And they get new upgrades to ports and all kinds of stuff to get stronger as well. So obviously, that's not going to be for me and Jen. As Shea pointed out earlier, we are a bit more Care Bearish, but I was very impressed how the Revenge of the Old Ones cards worked for the solo game, which is what I demonstrate. It makes the solo game have a lot more variety as well, so that was really nicely done. And my fingers are crossed. I haven't seen yet if they are going to make those solo rules work for the regular competitive game, and even more so the co-op game. They've got to work for the co-op game. Fingers crossed. But even still, Auztralia is a great, great game, and Tazmania and Revenge of the Old Ones, well, especially for us, Tazmania, really addresses all my problems, and very, very excited. Like I said, it'll be coming on Kickstarter soon. That was a paid preview. But the number 1 of the month, I've already mentioned it, is Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff. Yay! And interestingly, I think like Pietro, she also only has one alter ego card in her deck. You know what? Fine. I just have to resign myself. That's the way it is. We're lucky to get one. But hey, if you're going to do it like they did it for Wanda and put Agatha Harkness in. You know, obviously such an incredible, influential, supporting character for Wanda in her real life. You know, when I get Agatha Harkness into play, the comic book stories come to life in a so much more meaningful way. And it's much more about personal relationships and histories between these characters, in addition to all the, you know, the punching and the kicking, and which is all fine. And you know, Scarlet Witch is a great new character, adds a lot of random unpredictability, which is thematically appropriate because she's all about that chaos magic. But you know, it felt like it had been a while since I actually there was any like chemistry between my characters, and seeing Scarlet and or seeing Wanda and Agatha together and one supporting the other, it warmed the cockles of my heart, and it just makes me, it reminds me of what truly makes me excited about Marvel Champions and why I keep coming back month after month. So that was my number one expansion for the month, Scarlet Witch for Marvel Champions. And next month, we will have Guardians of the Galaxies in the Most Wanted expansion, which I've got. I just haven't finished yet. Otherwise, I would have talked about it today, too. But anyway, okay, so that's it for expansions. Let's talk about games. Continuing with the countdown formats, coming in at number 11 is Coatl, which I have to admit, I wasn't even planning on playing this. This is a very beautiful, lovely produced abstract game all about creating... I'd have to go back and look at the instructions. You know, these colorful ceremonial snakes that are part of ceremonial. I forget if I've totally forgotten if it was South American or it was Central American. I feel bad because they do actually talk about the background here, but at its heart, this is not a cooperative, a completely abstract game all about drafting these colorful snake pieces, storing them in your very, very limited, tight storage space, and then spending turns putting together these colorful snakes, trying to achieve various public and private goal cards you've got to score points. And it works really nicely. The design is great. It is a nice bit of tension. It's really fast, and I've got no complaints about that. Honestly, just the reason I wasn't that into it is because I'm not that intrigued by abstract games. But things kind of fell into place, and so Jen and I played it, and Jen loved it. Oh my gosh. And so all these years I've always said, Jen and I, we're just not that much into abstract games. I might have to amend that. I might have learned something that's mostly just me that needs that theme, because Jen said, "Oh yeah, we should totally keep this. This is a great, fun game." And it is. It's fun. It's fast. It works well as a two-player game, which is not always the case. But here, I mean, we had a good time, and I'm still on the fence though, because it's so abstract. A little bit more work could have been done to really bring the theme in without really changing too terribly much. I'm reminded of what was that? Plan B game, the Coral Reef game, where, I mean, just a couple little changes that it could have been much more thematic, but still, I will say that Coatl is a gorgeous game. If you like abstracts, if you like Azul, but you want something a little bit lighter, Coatl might be something you would want to check out. I mean, just look at it. It is great looking and a fun, solid drafting game as well. Okay, that was number 11. All right, then we move on to number 10. If I can push the button. There we go. Alhambra, the Roll and Write. This is a new Roll and Write game from Queen Games. Got the original designer of Alhambra. I want to say Dirk Henn, is that right? I believe. Came back to do a Roll and Write version. And while it captures the theme, it is definitely its own beast. It's a clever little game where when you are the lead player, you are going to... We have a grid of buildings we want to build, and we are racing to build them, to be the first to build all the brown buildings or all the purple buildings or all the blue buildings, because there's big points for coming in first or second. Coming in third, not so great. And so around our grid of buildings are numbers 1 through 6 in yellow and blue, and we have yellow and blue dice. And on your turn, you will have one yellow spot in the row and one blue spot in a column blocked off by these dice. So you might have a yellow blue and a yellow 2 and a blue 3. That means, hey, where those things triangulate, you could build that building. But so everybody can see, I could build that building. And again, we're trying to race targeting specific buildings. When my turn comes around, I get 2 more dice, and I roll them, and I put them in as well. And suddenly, I've got potentially up to 4 different buildings I could choose from to build, depending on how all these dice triangulate, depending on what I roll. And so here's the trick. I pick one building to build, and which means I use 2 of the dice that triangulate to this building. I set those dice aside. The other dice I didn't use, I give them to you. And I know that I'm giving them to you, and I can see, oh wow, you really want a yellow 6. I'm about to give you a yellow 6. I can't give you a yellow 6, but I really want to build this other building over here, which means I've got to give you the yellow 6. Super simple, clean little system, and it works so well. Really sharp, very fun, very interactive as well. I mean, because you really should be paying attention to what dice you're giving to your opponent at the same time that you're picking what dice are best for you. And then after you give those dice away, you re-roll the 2 dice you kept, and so the next player who's going to give you dice has to pay attention to what they might be giving you, because we're all racing to try to get majorities in all these different buildings, and to also try to completely fill rows and columns for big points as well. It's sharp, it's fun, it's fast. Interestingly, as a 2-player and a solo game, it, going back to Alhambra, brings in a dummy player, brings back Dirk, and it works really well. I did find, as a 2-player game, the dummy player Dirk, simple, clean, elegant. I don't think anybody would be bothered by it in terms of its upkeep. It's just a couple extra dice that is making us race to complete these buildings. So we have a 3rd place. I very much appreciate that. It did add a little bit of randomness to the overall proceedings, but I think it worked great. Here's the deal, folks. We're keeping it. It's that good. And I look forward to getting to play it at higher player counts someday, because it's a fun, fast little game. My number 10 of the month, Alhambra, rolling right. Then we move on to number 9, Genotype, which I mentioned earlier. Ryan covered from a rules perspective, and I did a run-through of it, and this is great. This is from Genius Games, and like all of Genius's games, its goal is to try to give us a fun time, a fun worker placement game to play with a lot of dice drafting as well, but also teach us about real scientific principles here about Mendelian genetics, and how base pairs become dominant and recessive traits, and how Mendel, I think it was a Franciscan monk, why he became known as the father of genetics, because he discovered these traits and these properties by breeding and crossbreeding pea plants. And that's what we're going to do. We are Mendel's assistants, and we are trying to follow in his footsteps, and it works great. The worker placement is good. The dice drafting is fantastic. There's tons of cool special effects. The AI, if you want to play it solo, is really well implemented also. I did a solo run-through of it and had a great time playing. My only complaint about the game is, as a 2-player, there could have been a little bit done to tighten things up. I'm thinking specifically about the drafting of dice, because there are so many dice to draft that you never really feel that much tension about getting what you want. If there were more players, those dice would be disappearing quick. And so I wish there'd been a little bit of something done. And also, the fact that you can fundamentally change the dominant and recessive genes of the parent plants is a really cool idea. But Jen, I found, because there were so many dice, we didn't have to do it that much. And again, I suspect all these things would come into play at higher player counts. So I would have liked to see just a couple tiny tweaks. That's all it takes. I can imagine a couple of very simple variants that would make this tight and just as dynamic as 2-player as it would be at higher player counts. But regardless of all that, the gameplay itself is really fun, and what I respect even more is the amount of work the developers did to include an entirely second rule book that has nothing to do with the rules of the game, but instead walks us through the real science, how the science is represented in the game, where they had to change the science to make the game fun. And so it makes learning about this stuff more interesting, because I already enjoy the game. And chef's kiss to Genius Games. They did a brilliant job. It's my number 9, just needs a few little tweaks for 2-player. Again, you can watch my run through, you can watch Ryan's rules video for Genotype. Then we move on to number 8, Escape, Roll and Write. Now this is the roll and write version of Escape, Curse of the Temple, which is in, I think, Jen's top 10 and my top 20, or maybe my top 25 of all time. We love Escape. And we love roll and write. So of course we're going to love this. And what's the deal? Well, first of all, folks, if you hate Escape, don't run away yet. because this game is not real time. There's no timer where we're rolling dice as fast as we can to try to explore through a temple and escape. In this game, the lead player, we have a bunch of dice, and on the lead player's turn, they roll dice 2 at a time. They can keep those dice for themselves to help them move through the temple, or they can put it in a public pool so all the other players, all their teammates, because this is a cooperative game, all their teammates can use the dice to try to decipher maps. They can give us extra bonuses that we can then use as backup dice when the dice don't go our way. And first of all, folks, I've been waiting for cooperative roll and writes. Where are they? This has got to be one of the first ones out there. And it works really well. It is very solid. The decisions you have to make of, I should really give this die to you because you could use it for the map, but if I roll another running man, I can use it to get over this room, and which one am I going to choose? Is very fun, very satisfying. It's a fast, tight playing little game, and yeah, we liked it quite a bit. My only complaint would be this is a recurring thing. 3 games in a row where they come in at the higher end of the list, mostly because it works well as a 2-player game, but man, this game would be better with more. Where when I'm trying to decide to keep the dice for myself or give it to my teammates, the more teammates I have, the more inclined I am to want to give dice so my teammates have more dice to use. Where if I've only got one teammate, you could only use 2 of the dice I give. So again, there's just less pressure. And I would have liked to see something that could have emulated that a little bit. But still, a keeper. I just want more cooperative roll and writes. And if, hey, they're themed after one of my favorite games of all time, and they have a nice, solid cooperative element to them, so much the better. It's my number 8 of the month, Escape, the roll and write. Escape. Alrighty, then let's move on to number 7, which is another paid Kickstarter preview, Space Plague. And this is a very interesting competitive game where we are alien species that are basically we are a plague. And we have come to a planet and we are trying to take the planet over. I mean, there's actually shades of colonialism, but, kind of put into outer space, to try to, I guess you could say maybe there's kind of a Star Trek thing going on where we're talking about real world issues through the lens of science fiction. I don't know if the game goes that deep though, because mostly it's just a silly, fun romp. I mean, it has a really great sense of humor throughout, and it has very solid gameplay also, because what's happening is we have this, channel that our plague tokens have to travel. They have to leave our landing ship and they have to make it to the planet core, and that's how they score points. And every round, all of the plagues we have managed to spawn in our ships are going to dutifully march forward, getting ever closer to scoring points. But also, every round, there are going to be events that will make certain landscapes incredibly dangerous and kill them, or events that will make good things happen. And so we are constantly having, and we have a hand of cards too, that we can play one card every round to spawn more stuff or get our guys to move quicker, or maybe stand still to avoid a disaster they're about to step into. And there's a surprising amount of depth and fun strategic gameplay, because, and this is what I can't stress enough, more publishers need to pay attention to Space Plague. They do events correctly, because it's not just, hey, at the beginning of a round, reveal a card and see what the event is and everybody has to deal with it. Instead, reveal a card, that event is going to happen 3 rounds from now. At the end of this round, the card that came out 3 rounds ago is going to hit. So you've had lots of time to prepare and decide, right, how am I going to make sure my little plague tokens are in the right place to take advantage of or avoid this event that's happening this round. And, this new one came out, so you are constantly, literally thinking 3 moves ahead because of these events. And it creates such an interesting and dynamic puzzle. Jen, I really liked it a lot. And while I just demonstrated my run through the basic game, check out the Kickstarter page. I don't think it's gone live yet. I think it'll be going live again in early April. They've got some plans for stretch goals like unique player powers and stuff like that makes the game look even cooler. Jen and I were really surprised, but I shouldn't have been. When I read the rules and I realized, they're doing events right. Unlike 99% of all modern board games that just think it's fun in a competitive game, hey, just flip a card, see what it is. Oh, yeah, that hurt you and it helped me. That really seems wrong. Here, everybody has a good chance to prepare and strategize, and it's what makes Space Plague very special. Watch for it coming on Kickstarter soon. And remember, this was a paid Kickstarter preview, folks. So, with that out of the way, let's move on to my number 6 of the month, After the Empire. Oh my goodness. This game is a fantastic, super atmospheric worker placement game where, I think we play through over the course of 7 years. It is after the fall of the Roman Empire. We are the head of medieval fiefdoms trying to fight off invaders, protect our vassals, and keep our castle in repair. Because the first half of every round is doing a pretty straightforward worker placement game to get resources, to invest in infrastructure for our castle, and also, wonderfully, to bring refugees into our midst. I mean, I love that the central message of this game, that refugees are a good thing, that variety is a good thing that is to be encouraged. My hat's off to the developers for saying, yeah, you definitely want to rescue these refugees because they will make your society stronger. Which is a lesson that we could all... I'll get off the soapbox, sorry. But anyway, so recruiting refugees, building up castle, upgrading the castle, investing in defenses, and after all the worker placement is done, at the beginning of the round, this is interesting, it's kind of a fallback space plague. At the beginning of the round, I have a little bit of advanced information. I can see where some of the hits are going to come, where they're going to come from north, south, east, or west. But other cards are put face down, and we won't know what they are. And after everybody's prepared as best they can, based on what we know and what we don't know, then we flip all the other cards, and we go through multiple rounds of deterministic combat as we try to fight off waves of invaders. And now my version is the basic one that just has like tokens and cubes to represent our troops and the invaders and stuff like that. But there's a deluxe version that actually comes with little miniatures and stuff like that, which for players who like such things really helps up the thematic atmosphere of the game. But I didn't care. I thought the game was a blast. It was that deterministic combat where there's no dice rolling. Instead, you can plot out right. Oh crap! We did not expect anybody from the south. I do have the opportunity to redeploy some troops, but not enough. Can I get down there? Okay, they will die, but if they can just hold the wall, we can take one more. Then we won't have a wall fall, and we won't have to fight. In the square. We won't get sacked. But heck, even if we do get sacked, worst comes to worst, we lose a wall. Invaders come in, and we can't fight them all off. We lose points. That hurts, but next round, we get an extra worker, and we get mercenaries to come join us, so we get consolation prizes so we can come back even stronger. The combat in this game is phenomenal. The worker placement is very solid, very good. There's a ton of variety with all of the different refugees and building types. Every time you play, you're going to see a different combination of stuff that comes out, and it's very impressive. My only problem with the game, the only reason this didn't make it into the top 5 of the month, is the theme. And I was always worried about it a little bit. My wife, Jen, she thought, yeah, the gameplay's good, but I'm just not having a good time killing all these people and having all these people die. If this had been a high fantasy game where we were fighting off waves of undead or something like that, I think she would have enjoyed it quite a bit more. So fingers crossed, there is an Undead Storm in the Castle expansion for After the Empire coming in the future. One other thing, by the way, people don't quite realize this. I actually ran through it using a great solo variant that the developers have come up with. And if you want, go check out my run-through, check out the show notes. You will find a link that you can contact the developers if you have this game. And if you'd like to try the solo works fantastically. It's not in the base game, but you can basically print out a handful of cards and replicate it. Great stuff. My number 6 of the month, After the Empire. Okay, now we go on to number 5. Cryo, which is another worker placement game, and this is from the design team of Tom Jolly and Luke Laurie, who have put out one of the greatest, maybe the greatest worker placement game ever, Manhattan Project Energy Empire. The work those two did on that game, which is in my top 20 of all time, is so amazing. And so when I heard they were getting together for another worker placement game, I had to be there day one, and I got the run through up, and it's great. Let's be honest, Energy Empire is a tough act to follow. This does not replace Energy Empire, but it is a really sharp game. Our interstellar colony ship has crashed on a barren, desolate planet. Our crew is going to freeze by the end of the day. We don't have much time, and so we have to send out drones, our workers, as fast as possible to survey the planet, scavenge together resources so we can get our people to safety underground, and that's how we score points, because it's warm down there, and they won't freeze at the end of the day. So So, really great theme. I really engaged. The presentation is fantastic. The worker placement is great too, because these drones, when you put them down in a worker placement spot, they are surrounded by 4 different actions they can do. So each worker has a wide variety of things they could pull off. And yet, in spite of that, you'd think that's so much variety, you can do whatever you want. But the game does a really good job of tightening up the board. So the spaces go quick. And speaking of quick, this game is epically fast. That sun will set very quickly. And while this is an engine building game, because you do want to upgrade your overall operations so that when you eventually recall your drones, because this is one of those games where you put the workers out and you can, anytime you want, you can skip a turn to get all your workers back. A lot of games do this. Concordia does this. Lewis and Clark does this. What makes Cryo special is when you call them, normally when you waste a turn calling them back, that's the most painful turn. Here it's maybe your most powerful turn because you could have gotten a lot of upgrade tokens to activate when the drones come back to your home base. And so you want to activate them, but every time they come back, the sun gets closer to setting. So the more you activate your base, the quicker the game end comes, and the game end comes fast. I think that's going to be the main frustration for some players is, they build an engine and then they want to spend time with their engine and they want to run it over and over again. This game, it doesn't give you that time because you're all about to freeze to death and you've got to move, move, move. I love that. That kind of tension of, can I get one more turn? I think is fantastic, and it makes Cryo a very fun game, but you got to know that going in. If you want a really long, epic, I get to spend so much time with my engine, like Energy Empire, Cryo's not going to give it. It is a fast, brutal, fun game, and it's my number 5 of the month, Cryo. Okie doke, let's move on to number 4, Scrumpy Card Cider, which is another paid Kickstarter preview. And this is a deck builder where players are running their own cider pressing business. And the deck of cards we've got represents all the various employees. And like any good deck builder, there will be more employees we can hire that give us access to better versions of our starting abilities or different abilities, conversion abilities, way to manipulate the game abilities. And it's interesting, not only every round of our hand of cards, we will get to play 3 cards out of our hand. And most of the rest will get discarded. So you don't get to use your whole hand. You have to be really, really smart about what you are going to use. But also every round, we have a worker that gets to do 1 action as well. So every round of this game, you'll do 4 actions. 3 card-based actions, 1 worker-based action. And that in and of itself is fine. But what really makes this game special is the fact that the cards we are getting, that we are building our deck with, that we are running our operations, they're multi-use. Because you can use the card for their main action that you probably hired them for. But instead, you can basically flip them over to convert them into either apples, because you can say, hey, I know you're my accountant, but today you're going to go out and pick apples because I need more apples because we are trying to compete for this particular objective and I just need 1 more apple. Accountant, put on your overalls, you're going to go pick apples. And then what happens is I take that accountant card, I flip it over, and then I tuck it under my board and it represents suddenly 1 more apple. Or 1 more piece of lumber because maybe I have my accountant go out and gather some lumber so I can make barrels to put my cider in. And this is really interesting because there have been other games, deck builders, where, hey, I've got my deck of cards, I'm putting more and more cards in. And eventually I get to the point where I need to take all the cards out to score them. Like, Dale of Merchants is a great example of that. But the interesting thing about this game is I am constantly adding new cards and removing cards because these cards are effectively getting converted into the apples that they went out and picked, or the lumber, or the bottles of cider that were bottled and whatnot. And when that happens, I lose that accountant. I lose that gardener. I lose whatever it is. And until I actually bottle and sell those apples, I'm not going to get them back. And that can be a big sacrifice. But this is a race game where players can see the public objectives because there are certain outlets that want to buy our cider. And if you don't sell quick, you'll sell for much less later on. So you have to make those tough trade-offs of giving up your cards that you invested in to turn them into resources and then trying to get those resources put through your production process as fast as possible so they will come back into your deck. That's a brilliant idea. So your deck is constantly ebbing and flowing, getting bigger and then getting smaller and then getting bigger and getting smaller when you complete orders for the restaurants and whatnot. Great stuff. Really sharp, really clever. I mean, of course, there are so many deck builders out there. To see one that so radically changes up the formula while still being true to what makes a deck builder great, well, I had to give it my number 4 of the month. Although, like I said, this was a paid Kickstarter preview. Scrumpy Card Cider. Okay, now let's move on to number 3, Hadrian's Wall, which has I was going to say it's probably the biggest roll and write you've ever seen, but there's a. I told you right up front, folks, no April Fools. Let's tell the truth. This is not a roll and write. This is a flip and fill. Instead of rolling dice to see what resources you get, you flip a card every round to see what resources you get as you are trying to help contribute to the building of Hadrian's Wall in Roman-controlled Britannia. And this is still, the right part of the game is definitely right there. And really, the closest parallel the simplest way, the elevator pitch I would give for Hadrian's Wall is, this is Gone Shown's Clever taken to an 11. Because, like Gone Shown's Clever, this is all about, filling in different fields on your 2 pieces of paper that represent your enterprise to try to build Hadrian's Wall. Because there's so much stuff you can do. I cannot stress just how deep this game is. There are so many different things, and it's totally overwhelming. If you are watching this on YouTube right now, or if you watch my run through, I'm sure you look at it and say, I don't even know what to look at. There's so much stuff. And that is a daunting thing. Make no mistake. When I was teaching to my wife Jen, but after you get through a round, you will see that while it looks like there's a lot, there are a few very simple rules to understand that make everything just flow and so it feels really good that I'm in control of this huge, incredibly complex operation, and yet it's driven by just a few simple, very easy to remember rules. And every round, I am taking those resources that we harvest, converting them into actions to get better citizens for my outpost, or upgrading my outpost, or building the wall, or building defenses, because like after the Empire, every round, invaders will come. We don't know where the invaders are coming from, so we have to prepare on multiple flanks, and it's great. Really, really sharp. And I definitely say it has to win for the most options. There is so much you can do in this game. It's not as heavy as Roman Roll or Pandoria Merchants. Those are definitely heavier roll and writes. I would say it's probably on the same boat as Fleet the Dice game, which is to say much heavier than most roll and writes, but still not a super heavy game. But don't be fooled by the incredible level of complexity of this game. It's at its heart, it's a fun, fast, and very satisfying game. Really liked it a lot. Only complaint I have is it feels like it goes on one round too long. It feels like, in Jen's and my experience, if it had ended one round sooner, we've played this 3 times now, and we feel like we just get too much done. That we complete too many objectives. And we're like, we should be ending it before we get a whole nother round. Oh my gosh, I get to do more stuff? Which is something maybe somewhere down the road, maybe we might want to say, hey, it plays for 5 rounds instead of 6, and we skip the first round or something like that. And we get to the higher, tougher, nastier barbarian, or the Picts faster. I don't know. It's a minor complaint, though, because we have a great time. This is basically, it kind of harkens back to the Morgana expansion. But that aside, again, the Gone Shown cleverness of this game, where so many of your turns are, okay, well, I'll tick this box, which gives me this benefit, which lets me do this. Oh, and that gives me this other action that does do these 2 things. You end up so many times creating these wonderful cause and effect chains based on smart play. And there's other cool stuff too. Some interaction with your neighbors, because you can engage in trade in kind of almost a 7 Wonders kind of way. Really great stuff. Number 3 of the month. Fantastic. Hadrian's Wall. Okay. Number 2 is Meadow. Oh my gosh. First of all, this has got to be one of the prettiest games my wife and I have played in years. All the art on all the cards is just drop dead gorgeous. And when you are not playing the game, you should be thinking about what your next turn is, but it's kind of hard not to just gaze lovingly at all the wonderful flora and fauna that you will discover when you go through a walk in your meadow. That's the theme of the game. We're basically trying to collect cards to represent having the best walk possible. I love that theme. I love a theme about just living a good life. And that's what Meadow is. And at its heart, it is a card drafting game that is very crunchy, surprisingly so, because at the beginning of a round, we've got these paths that represent what we can follow. We put a path down on the main board. That points to several cards. And the path has a number that says, oh, if you put this here, you have to take the 2nd card in this row, or the 3rd card in this column, or whatever. And so as you use up your paths, it gets tougher and tougher to get the cards you want, because you're trying to do different types of set collection and combo chaining, and it's all really elegant and wonderful and compulsive and fun. Oh my gosh, is this game fun and gorgeous. It's great as a solo game. Jen and I really loved it as a 2-player game. Kind of has vibes similar to Quadropolis, if you ever played that. The card drafting is kind of similar to the tile drafting. And by the way, Quadropolis is awesome too. But man, Meadow, Oh my gosh, it's just so pretty and so sharp and so fast and so fun. It's not available yet. I actually have a prototype, although you wouldn't be able to tell. It looks like a final version. And I think it's going to be going into distribution later this year. I'm not quite sure what the story is, but watch for it, folks. This game is fantastic. I don't know. It's too early to say if this might be a top 10 of the year, but this is up there. This is one of those kinds of games that I think everybody is just going to love very deeply. Everybody who wants to play this might be this year's Calico, quite frankly. That is high praise for my number 2 of the month, Meadow. Okay, but we've got one more, folks. The number 1 game of the month, which was a paid Kickstarter preview, so always bear that in mind, is Hippocrates, which is a new design from Alain Orban, who is part of the Pearl Games trio, or Alain and Javier Georges and Sébastien Dujardin. When these three work together, they make some of the greatest games of all time. I'm talking Trois, I'm talking Tournay, I'm talking Black Angel. But they have all had successful solo design careers as well. Although I have to admit, when I talked about it in my final thoughts, I hadn't really played much of Alain's other games, but this one, which is Alain working on his own, flying solo, oh my gosh, is he a heavy hitter. This game is so great. It is, there are 3 parts to this game. Every round, we're going to go through 3 phases. First, we draft patients from the ancient world who have various maladies, because we are all students of Hippocrates trying to learn how to be physicians. And first we do no harm, and second we try to save as many people as possible to score points. So the first thing we do every round is we go through this very interesting draft, which is really tense. And the selection kind of reminds me of Five Tribes a little bit. Kind of. The way you use these turn order markers, and turn order is a hugely important thing, and based on how you grab stuff, it changes turn order. It's constantly in flux, but it's wonderfully done, brilliantly done. Anyway, after you're done with that, and you've got some patients, and you only have you have 2 rounds to save them, or they die, and you lose points, so you don't want that to happen. Then the second half of the round is we go out and we can recruit doctors, extra physicians who can help us cure them. And so, as you might imagine, the drafting is all about trying to match the patients that we get in the beginning of the round with the physicians we will get in the middle of the round, because you can see who some of the physicians are, but you can't see all of them. So when we get to the second, a bunch of them will be turned face up, and you're like, oh, well, I was planning on getting this guy, but this guy might be better. But again, turn order is everything in this game, and turn order is constantly in flux, and you can really be left out in the cold, even at a low player count. This game has got to be one of the best 2-player scalings I have seen in a long time. Alain Orban, I do not feel any kind of sacrifice here when I play this as a 2-player game. I really feel like all the tension and excitement of a higher player count game is here, even though it doesn't have any automa or complicated mechanisms to keep track of. It's just beautiful and clean and elegant and just super sharp. But anyway, so you draft some doctors. Oh, and by the way, you also have to keep track of your money, because the doctors will leave if you don't pay their salaries. So that's a problem too. And then the third thing you do every round is you do this almost kind of puzzle of snapping together the patients and the doctor tiles, so that the doctors can be used most efficiently, because they can serve multiple patients. And sometimes patients need multiple doctors because they've got such a wide variety of symptoms, and the different types of medicines have to be applied. So you get into this really interesting kind of almost domino style game of trying to match different things together, and that's really sharp too. All 3 of these, like separate games that come together into one smooth experience, are great. And the first one directly affects the next, because when you're drafting those patients, you're trying to get the right patients based on the doctors you have and the ones you can see. But also, when you, depending on where you draft, you can get medicine, and you can get money, and you can change your turn order via prestige and whatnot. Also, every round you're rolling dice, and those dice severely restrict, because the assistants of Hippocrates say these are the people you must service. Although you can get your own assistants if you draft smartly, so you can override the Hippocrates assistants. There's a lot going on. It's a great presentation. It's very fast, very fluid, a quick game. This is under an hour as a 2-player game, and I don't think it would take that much longer as a higher player game too. Really satisfying from start to finish. Is there any surprise there? It is my number 1 game of the month, Hippocrates. Oh, folks, and that is it. Phew. All right. A very good month. A lot of exciting, fun games. And of course, moving into my 10th year of filming now, I expect to continue to bring you more exciting stuff next month. So, as always, we shall adjourn for now, but I'll see you again in 4 weeks when we run through the games of April. And I just want to say thanks very much, as always, for watching, folks. And also thanks to the folks at Fun Again Games for sponsoring the show. Have a nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.